The demand is strong, but silent. So what we've got to do is we got to cross the Rubicon of dialogue. We have to demonstrate that dialogues and deliberations and being able to listen to people are not only happening but possible, especially when you think it's the least unlikely. The tide is turning on college campuses. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of The Hopeful Majority. The question we're going to answer today is, why is the tide turning on college campuses? And what do you mean, Manu, that the college campuses are getting better? All I see is crazy headlines in the news. I see students getting detained. I see the universities getting pressure being put on. I see college campuses not being open to viewpoint diversity, dialogue. It looks like a shit show out there, to be frank. What do you mean the tide is turning on college campuses? Well, the semester just ended, and Bridge USA, which is the organization I help lead, where we have college chapters across the country, we are now doing an inventory of the impact that all of our students made as it relates to dialogue and deliberation. And I've got some great news. But before we get to that, again, welcome to the Hopeful Majority. Today, we're going to do a monologue instead of a normal interview episode conversation. Every Monday, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, as you know, we bring together the show because the goal is to demonstrate that most people are interested in open-minded dialogues and conversations, and there's an appetite for that, especially at this moment. And we're seeing that not more, not less, but extraordinarily high demand, specifically on college campuses. So, what do I mean by the tide turning on college campuses? In the status quo, we just finished Bridge USA chapters, their semesters, and we did an accounting. How many students did our chapters engage? And for those of you that don't know, those of you that are new to the show, again, welcome. What Bridge USA chapters are, they're college organizations led by students, very brave and courageous students, whose goal is to be able to have open-minded dialogue, conversation, wanting to listen to people that are different than themselves. You know, crazy demands in a very crazy time. No, but in all seriousness, what they're doing is they're saying, in the face of conflict, in the face of increasing polarization, we're going to do the really difficult thing, which is we're going to get people of very different views and backgrounds to actually listen to each other. I know, a profound and shocking concept, especially at this time. So we just did an inventory, and we learned that this spring, our chapters engaged approximately 10,000 plus or minus a couple hundred students across all programming, and they held about 493 gatherings. These gatherings are events and discussions. Now, why is this number significant? In the fall, our chapters engaged approximately 10,900 college students, which was a record for our students. That meant, for context, for our first 3 years of Bridge USA, combining fall and spring, we did not have this many students. Now, why am I spending so much time on numbers? This is a show about politics, how to improve politics, and people like me go nowhere near numbers. Why am I talking about this? Fall, we had a record-breaking semester. Broke all records. Why is that? Well, we said, okay, it's the election. Students are probably engaged in our politics. People are thinking about Trump or Biden. They want to get engaged in different ways. So they got engaged. They got active. They showed up to Bridge USA dialogues because they were sick and tired of all the outrageous nonsense of the status quo. And yet, so we said, well, if we had such a high turnout, we're probably going to see a decrease in the spring because the election's over. It's lame duck. You know, first 100 days of President Trump, people are probably tired of the politics election. They don't want to show up. And yet 10,000 students show up again in the spring. And here's what that tells us. Here's why that's significant. Another record-breaking semester for all of our spring engagement. It means that what these students are finding is that there is a massive hidden demand for conversation, for diverse ideas, for being able to listen to people that are different than ourselves. And most importantly, that demand is showing up at the grassroots. It's showing up within the student body. And that's really powerful signal for universities. Any university president listening to this, any faculty members, any students that are listening to this, what you should know is that the tide is turning in college campuses. Number one reason is that most students, I think, are passionate, interested, or at least curious about wanting to reduce the level of outrage in their lives, the level of polarization, and actually seeking solutions, actually listening to people. Gone are the days where the idea that you talk to somebody that is different than you is crazy. And instead, we are now in the days where talking to people that are different than you is not only essential to being able to have better conversations, but I think it's essential for the actual strength and survival of our democracy. And that's a really powerful shift because students are actually the grassroots culture setters on a campus. Any institution you take, whether it's American society, Congress, you think about uh, uh, college campuses, the grassroots layer, the people, the constituency is what sets the tone and the culture. When we started Bridge USA back in 2017, as we've been building the show, The Hopeful Majority, most people will tell us, well, most people are not interested in conversations. Most people say, I'm curious about dialogue. I want to be part of the hopeful majority. But is that the case with everybody else? Well, I'm here to break it to you that things are changing. And I think what that means is that because students are more excited, because students are more passionate, you actually have unique opportunities on a campus to shift the culture, to be able to use this as an opportunity to actually increase the level of open minded conversations, to market universities. Colleges, I think, can be the blueprint for social change across institutions in society. And this goes to reason number two for why the tide is turning on college campuses as it relates to dialogue, listening, conversations, open minded engagement. And that is that university administrations, university leadership, college presidents are actually supporting and elevating efforts of conversation and dialogue. Again, gone are the days where there was constant focus and pushback on engagement, on listening, on conversations. Administrators are no longer walking on eggshells. You're seeing a lot of focus. There's an organization we work with called the Institute for Citizens and Scholars. Look them up. They're led by an amazing leadership team led by Rajiv Vinakota. They've got a college campus initiative where they've got college presidents that have joined in to actually sign a commitment to say that we actually believe in viewpoint diversity and academic freedom and civic engagement on our campus. College presidents, cue this video right here. Wisconsin Madison, right here. Chancellor is saying that they believe in open-minded dialogue on campus. They actually just give a shout out to the Bridge USA chapter. Let's actually hear that for a quick second. And then you've got, on top of that, folks like Ven Meester, who lead our University of Wyoming chapter. You go back to episode 82. At the University of Wyoming, they're working with their student body, their college president, their faculty members to think about ways in which they can facilitate more conversation, more dialogue. They've actually focused on elevating student leaders that are doing great work. Our chapter at University of Wyoming and other campuses are getting more and more support. So it's not just grassroots, but it's also the top down. And that is an important signal because if you can start to combine the grassroots with the top down, you can begin to achieve transformative change. And what do we mean by that change? I don't mean change in a liberal sense. I don't mean in a conservative sense. I mean it in a literal, classical, liberal American sense, which is this idea that you cannot have a democracy if you cannot talk to each other. And specifically, if you can't have the conversation on college campuses, where the hell are you supposed to have that dialogue? Where are you supposed to have that conversation if not for our campuses? And that's why I think at this moment, you're starting to see the tide turning. And here's reason number three. The demand is strong, but silent. So what we've got to do is we got to cross the Rubicon of dialogue. We have to demonstrate that dialogues and deliberations and being able to listen to people are not only happening, but possible, especially when you think it's the least unlikely. What do I mean by that? Episode 78. You can look at it right here. Christian will put up the thumbnail. Episode 78, our Israel-Palestine dialogue took place at the Columbia chapter. The Columbia University chapter held a dialogue on Israel-Palestine. Some of you that are regular listeners of the Hopeful Majority have heard me talk about this story before, and this has happened on many other campuses. We actually had 16 Israel-Palestine conversations happen last year, especially in the aftermath of the tragedy of October 7th. Why do I bring this up? Because one of the key themes that came out of that Columbia dialogue was students came up to us afterwards and said, we wish we saw more of this. Where has this been? Where has this been? People are craving conversations. People want to be able to listen to people that are different than themselves. And especially on an issue like Israel-Palestine, if you can't have that conversation, not only on a campus, but if you can't have that conversation in an open environment, in a setting where you can be able to engage and debate and push back, how are young people supposed to be able to develop their views? And importantly, I think young people like ourselves are becoming awakened to that reality. And now you've got an awakened constituency on a college campus, which are Bridge USA students across the country and others that are passionate and demonstrating that you can have the most difficult conversations in the most divided times on the most divisive issues. And they're not just showing that these issues can be talked about. they're actually demonstrating that it's not just about compromise, it's about being able to understand why the person on the other side actually disagrees with you. If you can get to the core of why, the power of why at this time helps us drive to more understanding. It might not lead to compromise, it might not lead to changed minds, but what it leads to is a greater understanding that the people that are different than us might not be evil. People that are different than us in their viewpoints might actually have a reason for why they believe what they believe. It's not to justify, but it's to understand. And I think campuses are demonstrating that. And our Columbia chapter was a great example. And actually, we'll have some more students on in the coming episodes for you to be able to see that this is happening across multiple campuses. So, what were the three reasons? First, we saw the same amount of attendance in the spring, record breaking 10,000 students, that we saw in the fall, which was a record for us because of the election. Means that the demand is incredibly high. Students want to be able to listen and engage. Second, we're seeing universities and administrations actually supporting civic dialogue across campuses. That is a turning point. That is different than what we saw in the past. And finally, number three is that you can have the most difficult conversations on the most divided topics, and people not only are showing up, but they want it. That's frankly why I think podcasts are growing. That's why I think long form content is growing. I think people are sick and tired of the past and they want something new. Here's what's new: dialogue, listening, bridge building, being able to bridge our differences, being able to demonstrate that there's new ways, new solutions that we haven't talked about before. And the way that you get to those solutions is by creating new coalitions. You catch what I'm saying? The tide is turning on college campuses. And I think especially at this time with so much attention on campuses because of what the Trump administration is pursuing on multiple campuses, including Harvard, I think what you start to see is you're going to start to see new efforts like Bridge USA chapters that are not conservative or liberal, that are not politically driven, but they're simply driven by core tenets of bridging conversations, dialogues, and I think they're going to be led by students, faculty, and administrators. And that is why I think the tide is turning. I appreciate you listening. That was another episode of The Hopeful Majority in the books. I'll see you next week, every Monday, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, where you get your content. If you want to support open-minded conversations, you want to support dialogues, you want to support the growing hopeful majority, well, you got to leave a like, you got to subscribe on YouTube, we got to run through the runs, you got to make sure that you leave a rating, leave a review. See, I've been doing this for 93 episodes, still stumble. Leave a rating or a review on Spotify and Apple. I appreciate your time, appreciate you listening. I'll see you next week, my friends, because the tide is turning on college campuses, and I'm happy about it.